Welcome back everyone to another video in our construction engineering course. In this video, we are going to learn about earned value analysis. During the execution of any project, we need to always monitor the performance of our project to find out if we are going in the right way or if there is anything that needs to be changed or modified. Earned value analysis is one of the methods that we can use to measure the performance of our project in terms of progress and cost. In terms of progress, we need to know if we are going behind the schedule, which means that we are late and we might have a delay in our project, or if we are ahead of a schedule, which means that we are going in a faster pace than the planned one. Or if we are going on a schedule, which means we are exactly where we are supposed to be in terms of progress. I believe this is very simple and we all understand that. But in order to understand the performance of our project in terms of cost, we must understand that right now we will be talking from the contractor's point of view, and we want to know if the project is still profitable to us or not. Because we learned earlier in the lecture of types of contracts that the relation between the owner and the contractor depends on the type of contract. So for example, in a fixed cost contract, the owner doesn't care about the financial performance of the project, because the contractor is obligated to finalize the project based on the agreed on value anyway. While it is very important for the contractor in this case to assess the financial performance of the project, to find out if he is gaining money or losing money because of this project. So earned value analysis can help us to assess the financial performance of the project to understand if we are going under budget, which means we are spending less than we are earning, which is a positive sign because this means that the contractor is gaining profits, or if we are going above budget, which means that we are spending more than we are earning, which is a negative sign because this means that we are losing money, or if we are on budget, which means that both spending and earnings are equal, so the project is neutral in this case. To understand the earned value analysis, there are three terms that we must understand. First is the planned value, which is the planned value of works that should have been finalized at any given point of the project, based on the approved project schedule. Second is earned value analysis, which is the actual earned value of the works completed as per the contract. And third is the actual cost, which is the actually spent money till date to finalize these works. In the next slide, it is going to be easier for you to understand the relation between those values. Let's take an example here for a 100 million project that takes 1 year to be executed as per the approved time schedule. What we can see here in blue is the planned progress curve. We can see that it is not linear. Normally it looks like that, and this is why we call it the S curve, because in the beginning you always have a slow progress because of all of the enabling work at the beginning of the project, and in the end there is also slow progress because of the closing out process, while in the middle you have the highest rate of progress. So at any point of the project, we can calculate the planned earned value based on this curve. So this is the planned value curve, but the earned value curve will never exactly match this curve, because it depends on the actual executed works. So here we can see a sample for the earned value curve in black. We can see that at some points the earned value curve is higher than the planned value curve, which means that the project was ahead of a schedule, and at some points the earned value curve was lower than the planned value curve, which means that the project was behind the schedule. And finally, both curves identical at the end point, which means that the project was completed exactly at the planned time in the end. And now we can see the last curve, which is the actual cost curve, and this reflects the actual expenses the contractor had to pay through the project at any point, and we can see that this curve is irregular. So now we can have a quick evaluation for the project at different points. Let's start by this point. Here we can see that the earned value is higher than the planned value, which means that the project was ahead of schedule, but the actual cost was higher than the earned value, which means that it was over budget. Let's check this point. Here we can see that the earned value was lower than the planned value, so the project now is behind schedule. However, the actual cost was lower than the earned value, which means that the project was under budget. And finally, the last point of the project, and here we can see that both earned value and planned value were identical, which means that the project was completed on schedule, and the actual cost was lower than the earned value, so it was under budget. And the difference between the final earned value and the actual cost is the contractor's profit from this project. Here we have a sample for a project with total budget of 8 million that should be constructed within 12 months. At a certain point, the planned value was 2 million and the earned value was 1.6 million, while the actual expenses were 1.2 million. So what is the performance status of this project? We can see that the planned value was higher than the earned value, which means that the project is behind the schedule, but the actual cost is less than the earned value, which means that it is under budget. So this project currently is behind the schedule and under budget. Here we have another project with total budget of 20 million. At a certain point, the planned value was 15 million and the earned value was 17 million, while the actual cost was 18 million. So the planned value is lower than the earned value, which means that the project is ahead of schedule, but the actual cost is higher than the earned value, which means that the project is above budget. So the project is currently ahead of schedule and above budget. It was important to understand first the meaning of the earned value analysis before we start learning the equations. And actually, the equations are very simple, and we have already used them during our evaluation in the previous examples. First, we have the schedule variance, which equals the earned value minus the planned value. Then the cost variance, which equals the earned value minus the actual cost. The result here is a value, and if it is higher than 0, this is a good indication, because it means that the project is ahead of schedule or under budget, and if the result is lower than 0, this is a bad indication, because it means that the project is behind the schedule or above budget. Then we have the schedule performance index, which equals the earned value over the planned value, and the cost performance index, which equals the earned value over the actual cost. And the result here is a percentage. So if it is higher than 1, this is a good indication, because it means that the project is ahead of schedule or under budget. And if the results are lower than 1, this is a bad indication, because it means that the project is behind the schedule or above budget. So those are the tables that we have already explained that you can use to determine the status of the project at any given time based on the variance analysis. Now we are going to learn a new concept, which is trend analysis. And trend analysis is forecasting the expected cost at the completion of the project at any point of the project. In order to do that, we need to learn the following terms. Budget at completion, which is the original budget of the project to complete all of the works. Estimate at completion, which is the estimated cost at completion of the project, and it depends on the actual cost performance of the project. And finally, estimate to complete, which is the remaining cost to complete the works, and it depends on the estimated cost of the remaining works. We learned in this lecture that any project have a cost performance index, which is the CPI, and we learned how to calculate it. When the CPI is higher than 1, this means that the project is having a good financial performance, which means it is expected to finish with a cost less than the original budget if we kept going with the same performance till the end. And if the CPI is less than 1, this means that the project is having a poor financial performance, which means it is expected to finish with a cost higher than the original budget if we kept going with the same performance till the end. So when we start calculating the estimated at completion cost of a project at any given point, we are going to have to assume one of the following assumptions. First is that the remaining works will be completed based on the original planned rate, which means that the remaining work is going to have CPI equals 1. And the second option is that the remaining works will be affected by the current CPI and will have the same current CPI of the project. And third option is that the remaining works will be affected by a combination of both current CPI and SPI, which is the schedule performance index. To understand the difference between those cases that we have mentioned, let's check this graph. Here we have a project that has this line as the planned value for the project through its lifeline. We are going to assume that it is linear, just for this example to make it easier to understand. Now let's assume that 3 months have passed on this project. And now we have this line representing the actual cost with CPI equals 0.8, which means that the project is currently running over budget. And we have this line representing the earned value with CPI equals 0.7, which means that the project is running behind the schedule. So what do you think the cost at completion is going to be? In order to calculate that, we need to assume one of the 3 assumptions. The first assumption is that if the remaining works are going to be completed based on the planned rate, in this case, the trend line is going to look like this, which is a line that has the same slope of the original planned cost performance, and not the current actual cost performance. The second assumption is if the remaining works are going to be completed based on the actual cost performance. In this case, the trend line is going to look like this, which is a line that has the same slope of the current cost performance. And finally, the third assumption is if the remaining works is going to be affected by both the CPI and SPI. And we know that the SPI in this project is 0.7, so in this case the remaining cost is going to have even worse cost performance than the current cost performance, because it will be negatively affected by the currently poor schedule performance also. So the trend line is going to look like this. So actually the difference between the 3 assumptions is the following. First assumption is the most optimistic one, which assumes that we are going to rectify whatever mistakes that we have currently, and the remaining work is going to have a CPI of 1. While the second and third options are expecting the remaining works to keep going with the same current rate, either affected by CPI only or by both of the CPI and SPI. So now that we understand the main concept, let's check the equations. First condition, if the remaining work will be completed based on the planned rate, so the estimate at completion is going to equal the actual cost minus the earned value plus the original budget at completion. Second condition, if the current CPI will affect the remaining work, so the estimate at completion is going to equal the budget at completion over the CPI. And finally, if both CPI and SPI will affect the remaining work, so the estimate at completion is going to equal the actual cost plus the following: budget at completion minus earned value over CPI multiplied by SPI. This lecture is very important, and I know that it is dense with too much information, so I would recommend you to watch it a couple of times before you start solving the quiz and watching the videos for the quiz answers. In our next lecture, we will start learning some of the schedule control techniques such as crashing and fast tracking. So, this is it for our video today. See you in our next video. Thank you.